Hello everyone, this is Alex does Sudokus. I have a different Sudoku today with a Thermo Miracle Sudoku from Logic Masters. Someone posted it on the Sudoku subreddit and I decided to have a go at it. It's quite a tricky one. It's rated 4 out of 5 stars in difficulties ratings, and I've already had a go at it because I figured if I try to do it from fresh, it's going to take forever, and so hopefully I can solve this in a reasonable manner. I don't know if my method is the most effective, but it certainly got me to the end, and I found it quite interesting as well, so thought I'll share this and see what you guys think. So the rules are quite straightforward. We've got the normal Sudoku rules, and then we've got an anti-knight constraint, meaning that 2 cells in a knight's move away cannot be the same. Similarly, there's an anti-knight constraint, meaning no 2 cells can be a king's move away either, and that is basically so the knight's move is basically 2 up, 3 across, or 3 up, 2 across. With the anti-king's move on the chessboard, the kings can move in all directions, either orthogonally or diagonally in 1 square away. So that basically forms a ring around each cell. And then there's a non-consecutive constraint, which I think based on previous Miracle Sudokus that I've done is quite standard. It basically means no 2 edged adjacent cells, so this is the orthogonal rules, can be consecutive integers. I mean, it's always going to be integers, there are no decimals in Sudokus last I checked. So basically it means, for instance, we've got the 8 here, there can't be any 7s or 9s next to it because they'll be consecutive numbers. And finally we have an unusual thermometer here with 3 bulbs all pointing up towards a single cell, that is the red cell. So it uses a normal Sudoku, Thermo Sudoku rule where the numbers have to go up in increasing values as you go away from the bulb towards the end. Usually you have thermometers with a single path basically, but in this one, not only do we have 3 bulbs joining up into a single point at the end, we also have this one in the middle branching into 2 different directions. So it creates an interesting constraint for us. But those are basically all the rules, and with just that, a single digit is enough to solve this Miracle Sudoku. So why don't we get started on it? Now I think the first thing to start is obviously to do with the 8, and so the 8 does an interesting thing. It basically locks the end point of all the Thermo Sudokus, since we know that's the end cell, so it has to be the highest value for the entire thermometer, and it basically has already ruled out the 8 as a possible value. But before we start that, what I would like to do is to highlight all the cells that the 8 sees. So first of all, we've got the rule, normal Sudoku rule, where within the same cage we cannot have the same number. And then we've got the rows and the columns cannot contain the same value. And then we've got the anti-king constraint. So if we highlight all the cells that is a king's move away, and finally select all the cells that are knight's move away, that forms a collection of cells that we know the 8 cannot go in at all. So I'm going to start by highlighting them as purple. Although actually, yeah, that's fine. So the next logic is if the 8 cannot be in there, although actually we can't guarantee. So basically this cell, the red cell, if I delete the highlight, it cannot be an 8, but it can be a 9. So if that's a 9, then we can at least have an 8 as the next cell, but the 8 can't go there, so that could be an 8. However, as we go further down the thermometer, back to the bulb, there's no way that those cells can be 8 at all, because I'll have to have at least a digit higher than 8. So even with a 9 in the red cell, we cannot have an 8 further down the thermometers. So that rules those cells out. And can we do anything else with that? I don't think we can at the moment. So, okay. So let's think about the thermometer for a sec. We know where the 8s can't go. There's only one possible cell for the 8s to be. So can this be a 9? Obviously it can. So why don't we put a 9 in? Actually, no. Put a 9 in there. It can't be an 8. So I think the next logical step is figuring out, can that be a 7? And I think by working out the lowest possible value that this cell can be, we can narrow down what the remaining cells can be within further down the thermometer. So can that be a 7? Let's think about this. If this is a 7, then all the values underneath the thermometer have to be lower than 7. So, well, first of all, the immediate connected cells are within the same cage. So we can't have 2 6s there. We have to have 6 and 5 at best, if we want to have the maximum number of values within this thermometer. So let's say they are 5 and 6s. What would be available for the next row down in the thermometer? Well, we could immediately jump to the conclusion that these could be 4, 3, and 2. But actually, we can do more than that. We can actually use a 5 in one of these cells. And the reason is, for instance, if we... Actually, let me undo that. Let's say this is a 6 and this is a 5. Well, whilst I can't have a 5 beneath the 5s, I've actually got another cell that's outside the cage. So that could actually be a 5. And that will leave me with 4 and 3, because they all have to line up in the same row, and I can't have duplicated values. And with that, in theory, we can have 4, 3, and 2. But we can't have a 4 in any of these cells, because this 4 is a nice move away from these cells, and obviously adjacent to the final bulb. But we can still put in 3, 2, and 1. So that's a possibility. So that's one option. So we know that 7 is possible in that cell. Well, can it be a 6? So following the same logic, if that's a 6, then these cells have to be 4s and 5s to maximize our potential with the thermometer. So similarly, we can push a 4 out there, 3 and 2 in here. And now we run into a problem, because we need 3 unidentical numbers. We need 3 unique numbers at the bottom, and the lowest 3 numbers we can have are 1, 2s and 3s. So this 3 sees into all 3 cells, so that tells us that we can't have a 3 in any of these bulbs at all, which means 6 cannot possibly go into that cell. So now we've got a starting point here, because we know that's either 7 or 9. So what can we do with that? Well, if it's a 7 or a 9, what we do know is the consecutives, the adjacent cells orthogonally cannot be consecutive to 7 or 9. And 7 or 9 are both consecutive to 8. So that means those cells cannot be 8s anymore, and we can rule them out. And that leaves us with 3 possible cells for the 8. So we can now start to make some observations. For a start, we know that in this cage, the 8 has to be in one of these 3 cells. So we can remove the rest of them, because they can't exist in any of these cells. So the 8 has to live here somewhere. Now it's looking a little bit neater, but we can start doing more eliminations of this. And this is what I like about Miracle Sudokus. The next step with this puzzle is really, well, can we find any cells that sees into all these 3 cells? So wherever the 8 is there a cell that it can see? Yes, there is. this cell is a nice move away from those two cells, and a normal Sudoku rule away from the final cell, so we can actually rule that one out. And similarly, we've got a cluster of 3 cells here, where all 3 of them sees that cell through normal Sudoku rules for those cells, and the king's move away from this cell, so we can rule that one out. That one is also possible to be ruled out because that's a knight's move away from that cell, and a king's move away from the other 2. So we formed ourselves a second kind of restriction there. And finally, all these 2 cells both cease into that under normal Sudoku rule, and a knight's move away from that cell as well. So we can eliminate them as well. So we now know the 8 has to live in one of these 2 cells. Well, that creates a pointed pair, so we can rule out any of these cells now. So what can we do next? Let's see. Well, we've got another cluster of 3 here, and based on the previous kind of pattern, we can deduce that this cell, and this cell are all ruled out. This one by knight's move away from that, or normal Sudoku rule, and these 2 cells are adjacent to these anyway, and a king's move away, so it's safe to rule those out. Now, what can we do next? Okay, so let's look at these 3. They can all see into this cell because that's a nice move away and normal Sudoku rule away. So that's another elimination we've done. And can we do anything else on this? Let's see now. Ah, yes. These 2 cells sees that cell either knight's move away or king's move away. So we've eliminated another possible 8. And these 2 now forms a pointed pair, eliminating these two cells. And that gives us our first 8. And that 8 gives us a pair of 8s over here, eliminating this cell. Now these 2 8s both cease into these 2 cells, either through a knight's move or a normal Sudoku move away, so we can eliminate those. What can we do next? Well, these 2 cells, since we've eliminated that can't be an 8, these 2 both sees that cell and that cell as well. That's a knight's move away from both of them, and that's a normal Sudoku rule away from that, and a knight's move away from this, so we can erase those as well. And again, we've got a cluster of 3. But also, we don't actually need to do much here because we've just eliminated all the possible 8 on row number 7 in these 2 cages. So I know that now has to be an 8. Oops, that has to be an 8. And with that, we've just identified ourselves another 8 because that's been now locked off. And that 8 is a knight's move away from this cell, giving us the 8 in the center cage now. So, can we do any more with this? Yes, this 8 sees into that cell, so that's now out of play, and that creates a pointed pair, which eliminates that cell, giving us yet another 8. This 8 is a knight's move away from that cell, so that creates another pointed pair, giving me another 8. So now, if we colour away all the impossible cells for the 8, we are left with a pair of X wings, but we don't know where the 8 is in either of those. So I think that's the dead end from that kind of logic, basically. So let's pencil them in, and I realise this is already 11 minutes in, so I am already dreading how long this will take. I think this originally took me about an hour and a half to solve on and off, because I was watching my daily YouTube videos and I had to go make dinner as well. So let's see, highlight, can I just do that? Yep. So I've just deleted all the highlighting because I think it's okay for me to just look at these 8s now. So now we're in an interesting situation. I looked at I basically, at this stage, explored 2 different ways of approaching it, and unfortunately my first approach ended up with a dead end, basically, where I try to deduce what number this is by just looking down the thermometer. Although, to be fair, that's probably one way of doing it. I'm going to do the other way that I ended up using, because it has some interesting logic to it, and so let's just go ahead with that. I don't actually know if I can deduce that with the other logic, using, like, working out whether it's a 9 or 7, because I think it's quite drawn out to figure out what all the other cells could be, basically. So what I'm doing now is using the logic that consecutive cells, consecutive numbers can occupy cells adjacent to each other orthogonally. So basically, all the cells that I've highlighted, none of them could be 7 or 9 because they're both consecutive to 8. And also, these X-wings, wherever the 8 is, the other cell cannot be a 9 or 7 either, so they have to be ruled out as well. And that creates not a super useful pattern right now, but we'll try and do something with it. So I think the first thing to think about is the thermometer. If that is a 9, well, whether that's a 7 or a 9, I cannot possibly have well, actually, that's a lie. If that's a 9, I can have a 7 in there, but if that's a 7, I can't have a 9 in there. However, if that's a 7, there's no way that I can have a 7 further down the thermometer at all, because I'll have to have a number between the 7 and the 7, which is 7, which is impossible. So let's lock out those cells, but I don't know if that is a 7, then the other cell must be a 9. So let's have a look for patterns. And I think, based on my past experience playing with Miracle Sudokus, a couple of them, I think this is a good starting point for a pattern, because all these 4 cells sees into the same cell here. This is a knight's move away from these 2 cells, and a king's move away from those. So I can actually eliminate that. And let's see, where can I go next? I think already we've exhausted ourselves of candidates, because right now, using this pattern, we can't actually rule out any more cells. These 3 cells, they share all the cells that they see together are already ruled out anyway. So there's not much we can do about that. So what can we do then? Well, all the cells that are currently remaining can either be 7s or 9s. Well, using that logic, I made an observation here on this row. I've only got 2 places for either 7 or 9. Well, considering I've got 2 numbers that I'm looking for, and I've got 2 available cells, they must be 7 or 9. So that's useful to know. So what can we do next? I think this is why I got stuck initially when I tried this, and I took a break from the puzzle. I should have paused the timer, but I didn't. But when I came back, I decided to just basically play process of elimination, basically. So I already know that these 2 cells have to be a pair of 7s and 9s. So why don't I attack this puzzle looking at these 2 cells, because only one of these can be a 7 and a 9, or 7 or 9. They can't both be 7 or 9. Oh, actually, no, that's not the right logic. But basically, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to look for cells that cannot be a 7 or a 9 at all. So let's go through the logic. Let's say that this is a 7 or a 9. Well, what would that do? It will eliminate... Actually, no. If this cell, assuming that this is a 7 or a 9, then only one of these 2 cells can contain a 7 or a 9. Because if that's a 9, then only one of these 2 cells can be a 7 based on the logic that we had before with the 8. We've eliminated all the other possibilities. So with that in mind, if I look around the board, looking at either of these cells and where because all the white cells, bearing in mind, can contain a 7. So if I can use one of these cells and find myself in a dead end, then I can eliminate that cell. I don't know what the terminology is for that kind of approach, but to me it's just a process of elimination basically. So I'm going to start with this one. I ended up using green because it seems to be the only colour that's not too contrasting, and it's a way of saying that I'm assuming that that's the 7 or a 9 basically. So if the 7 goes in there, I'm going to say 7 for now. I'm going to assume that that's 9. If that's a 7, then these cells are ruled out, and that gives me a pointed pair of 7s, and it rules out those cells. So immediately we're stuck because, oh no, hang on, that doesn't mean anything. That means this cell would have to be the other 7, and it would make sense. If that's a 9, then that would have to be a 7 actually. But if that's a 7, using the king's move, we can eliminate that cell, so the other 7 must be here then. And that would eliminate these cells, giving me another 7. So I've got 2 possibilities up there. What else can I do? I can eliminate these cells, and let's see. These cells are eliminated, and that's a nice move away from that cell. So now that creates another pointed pair of 7s, which rules out that cell. These 2 cells also sees into this cell, so that must be another 7 then. And that would create another 7 up here. And since these are all eliminated by these 2 7s, that would have to be a 7. And now we're stuck because these 2 cells sees into all 3 cells, leaving us with 2 possibilities. But either of these cells sees into, this cell sees into both cells, both 7s, and that one sees into that 7 and might move away. So that's not possible. And in fact, that was also another 7. So this is basically the dead end that I was talking about. There's no way that this can be either a 7 or a 9. So I can go backwards and I can actually eliminate that. So now within this cage, I've only got 2 cells left for the 7 and 9. So I'm going to pencil them in. So what can we do? What can we do next? Let's see. So I think the next thing to do is I'm going to attack another weak area. So we've got a weak area here with 3 cells left. So let's look at each one of them again. See if any of them is a 7 or 9. In fact, I should be looking at these 2 cells because we already know that this has to be a 7 or 9. But if that's a 9, it could be next to a 7, so they're both possible candidates. So let's look at this one first. Let's assume that that's a 7 and that's a 9. These are 9s. Then that would have to be... Actually, either one of these could be... yeah. Let's just go around eliminating cells. So those are eliminated because they're either knights move away, kings move away, or normal Sudoku rule away. That creates a pointed pair, giving me... So it eliminates these 2 cells as well. They also eliminate those cells. And now these 2 diagonal ones will eliminate this cell. And in fact, both of these cells sees into this cell as well because that's a normal... This cell is a normal Sudoku rule away from this cell. And it's a knight's move away from that one. So that means that would be the next 7. And if that's a 7... then what do we say? Let's see, we've ruled out those cells. So that would have to be the next one. And also, those are now eliminated, so that would be another one. And there's another one down here as well. Those are now ruled out by this 7. Knight's move, king's move, normal Sudoku rule away. So we are now left with these 2, so since we have one there. And we've run into another dead end. Because now we're king's move away from the next 7 and 9. So that's safe to say that cell cannot be a 7 or 9 if the other 7 or 9s are deduced. So with that, But actually, I just realised there's another one down there. So, but anyway, we now have 2 cells left. Although actually, they don't see into any cells. However, I do know that they both have to be 7 or 9. So now something interesting happens. We've created a pair of pointers 7 and 9s. So with that logic, that cell can no longer be a 7 or 9. So what else can we do? So let's see. I don't know if there's some sort of like unique rectangle logic I can use here as well, but I think I'm gonna attack this cell next because I have a feeling that can't be a 7 or a 9 being so close to these two. Yeah, if you think about these two are nice move away from each other. So if one is 7, then the other has to be a 9, and they both would see this cell. So actually, these two cells are connected in a way. So let's say that's a 9. That will have to be a 7. That can neither be a 7 nor a 9 anymore, so we can eliminate that. Using the same logic, if these are 7 or 9, any cell that they see together cannot possibly be a 7 or 9. So can we use that same logic in other ways? Because they both see that cell as well. If that's a 7 and that's a 9, then yeah, that can't be a 7 or 9 either. So we've just eliminated another one. So now we are left with 7 and 9 in those cells, and that creates another pair of 7 and 9s. So I'm using slightly different logic now than I did earlier today, and it seems to be a lot more logical, and it's a lot quicker as well. I didn't have to go around the board continuously eliminating cells by just going around placing possible location for 7s. I've got another pair of 7 and 9s there, so we can eliminate that cell. Now all these 3 cells sees into that one, so that has to be eliminated. So let's see, I've only got 1 cell left on this row, so that has to be a 7 or 9. Let's see, so one of these two have to be 7 or 9s. Are there any other interesting? So these two both see into that cell, so if that's a 7 and that's a 9, both sees into that cell, so that can't be 1. Can we use the same logic with these two then? So if that's a 7, then that would be a 9, and that would be a 7. So, but that could be a 9. Yeah, they both could be 9s, so I can't use that logic to eliminate them. Okay. Can I do anything else then? What about these two? Yeah, these two are 7 and 9s on the same row, and they both see into that cell. So let's see, if that's a 7, that has to be a 9, and they both see into that, so that can't be a 7 or 9 anymore. So let's see. Can we do anything with that? I don't think we can now. So I think I've exhausted myself with possible candidates. Okay. No, hold on. Got excited there for a second. But I thought this can't be a 7 or 9 because it's next to an 8, but actually the 8 could be over here, so that would still be possible. So I think we are now in a situation where we probably want to do a bit of elimination again. So I think the kind of rewarding one is probably this cell, because we will eliminate 3 cells in one go. So let's pretend that this is a 7. If that's a 7, then that would be a 7, that would be a 7, and that would be a 7. So let's highlight those. And that would be a 7 as well. So that sees into that. Aha! So now we have locked ourselves out of this cage entirely. None of them can actually get into this cage. So that's safe to say that this cell cannot be a 7 or 9. So that gives me another 7 or 9, which is brilliant because that generates another... Oh, actually, I already had a 7-9 pair here because there are only 2 cells left in this row anyway. So sorry about that. I should have spotted it earlier. And now with the 7 and 9 there, I can eliminate these cells as possibilities. And Now one of these two cells have, oh actually that has to be a 7 or 9 as well, because of this cage. Now let's see, one of these two have to be 7 or 9, and I suspect that cell is the one that I want to eliminate. But let's see, if that's a 7, then that has to be a 9, and that has to be a 7, so they both seem to, but that can be a 9. Yes, so I think we should just play with this and see. I'm going to try this cell because it sees into 3 separate 7 or 9, so maybe that's... Although actually, if I use that one I may not be able to... Actually, let's try this one. If that's a 7, then that would have to be a 7. And it will also force the 7 into there, 7 into there, 7 into there, 7 into there. And also 7 into there. So now 7 is locked in that cell and that cell. So that's a possible pattern. Not very useful. What about this? If that's a 7, then that would have to be the 7, 7, 7, 7, and 7. Okay, so what can this do? Oh, we can't resolve this one actually. So those could be 7s, those could be 7s, but yeah. Well, actually, if one of those are 7, then that can't be a 7. Which means that has to be the 7. Which locks that one out. So that would have to be the 7. So that's also possible. We're not locked out because the final 7 will be there, and they're not breaking any of the rules at all. So that didn't help. Let's look at this cell then. If that's a 7, what would that do? If that's a 7, then that has to be a 7, 7, 7, 7, 7, 7, 7. So let's see. That would have to be a 7, and that would have to be 7. So that works as well. So that's disappointing. What about this cell? If that's a 7, then these can't be 7s. Oh, I can't even do any deduction if I try that one. So what about here? If that's a 7, then that has to be a 7, that has to be a 7, because knight's move, normal Sudoku rule away. So 7, 7, 7, 7, 7, 7, 7, and that's possible. Oh boy. Let's try one of these cells then. Let's see. If that's a 7, then that'll be 7. It'll be here. And let's see. There, there. There. And now I'm left with the next wing. So that's not helpful. What about here? That would lock a 7 in there, 7 in there, there. Aha! So that's a dead end. Or is it? Yes, it's a dead end because that 7 creates a pointed pair. So these 4 cells are now locked out, forcing a 7 in there. And that 7 sees into that, which means these two have to be 7s. And that 7 locks that cell out, and now we have 2 7s. Oh, in fact, what's going on here? Oh, hang on. I've done something silly, haven't I? No, that has to be a 7. That has to be a 7, that has to be a 7. So now that's locked. So yeah, I end up breaking the chain, and now have 2 7s locked in the same row, column even. So I now know that can't be a 7. So is that useful to me at all? Yes, because now we only have 2 possibilities for 7 and 9s here. So that's useful. So these 2 on the same column, they both see into that cell. So if that's 7, that's a 9. But they both see into that, so that can neither be 7 or 9. meaning I've got the final 7 and 9 in this column as well, and cage. I've only got one other possibility for 7 and 9 there on this row, and that creates a 7-9 pair on this column, so they're locked out. So I'm nearly done with this. So let's see. Still not quite there. I can't see any interactions that can lock any cells out, so I think I just have to do one last test. 7, if that's a 7, then that would have to be a 7, and that's already a dead end, because 7 can't be in either of these cells now, so that means that's not a 7 or 9. That has to be a 7 or 9, which means that has to be a 7 or 9. And, oh no, there's still possibilities. Okay, so is this an X-wing situation that I can't resolve? Okay, so this 7 and 9 is important because it's right next to, or falconry next to an 8. So we've just resolved the 8 there, so that's good to know. So now that can't be a 7 or 9 anymore because it's next to an 8. So that means that's a 7 and 9, which means that can't be 7 or 9 anymore, meaning the final 7 or 9 is penciled in. So this is how I ended up with an entire grid of 7 and 9s. And why is that useful? Wow, I'm glad you asked. Let's see, I'm just going to clean up the board now. Highlight, delete. So right now, it's a bit hard to deduce, for instance, where the 7 or 9 goes in there, because either could be a 7 or 9. Whereas if another 7 or 9 falls in the thermometer, then I know that the top one has to be a 9. But since they don't, I still can't resolve the 7 or 9 just yet. However, let's think about this. If we look at the cages here, 7 or 9, well, one of these two cells have to be a 7. Then neither of these cells could be a 6. So I can actually rule out those cells. Similarly, I've got a diagonal match here, so neither of these two cells can be a 6. I've got another diagonal 7 or 9 here, so that rules out those cells of 6s. This creates pointed triple of 6s, so none of these can be 6s. I've got another diagonal there, so those can't be 6s. I can rule out the 8s as well, so let's highlight those as well. These can't be 6s either, so there's another diagonal corner. And obviously the 7 or 9s can't be 6s either, so let's colour them in, leaving us with the white cells, and see if we can do anything else on this. Have we definitely identified all the 7s and 9s? Yes. Okay, so the next step is, again, let's look at the thermometer again. If that's a 7, only one of these can be a 6. But it ensures that I can't possibly have a 6 in the next layer. Although, if that's a 9, well, I can't have an 8 in here, so, and I can't have 7s in there either, because I've already locked the 7 and 9, so the earliest that the 6s can be would be in one of these two cells. So that means none of these can be 6s, because I can't have 6s after the 6s. So let's see. So that creates another pointed triple, which means that can't be a 6 anymore. And that's really useful because that gives us a first pair of 6s. And these two 6s all look into these two cells. Kings move away, normal Sudoku array. Knights move away, normal Sudoku rule away, so we can get rid of those. And these three all sees into this cell. Kings move away, normal Sudoku rule away. So let's see, anything else? No, I think that's as far as I can go. Now, this is interesting because 6 has to be in one of these cells. So let's think about this for a second. If the 6s aren't in the thermometer, what would they be? Well, if they're not in there, they have to be 5 and 4. Oops. If there are no 6s in the thermometer, they have to be 5 and 4. And I know for a fact that there's no way I can get 3, 2 and 1 at the bottom, because if that's the best I can do is 4, 3 and 2. And now we're stuck because the 3 has locked out of those 3s. Well, actually, I suppose we can do 3 and 2. But now none of these can be 2s, so I can't fit 1, 2 and 3 in there, which are the only remaining digits for the thermometer, because the 2 sees into all 3 cells. So based on that, I can safely say the 6 is in one of these 2 cells, so it's not in there. But I don't think I can do anything with that information, because that doesn't actually allow me to eliminate cells away from the cage. But since we've got a pair of 6s, and these 2 interact on the night's move away, so why don't we assume that this is a 6? Then we'll force a 6 in there, and we'll lock a 6 in there, because that's a night's move away from that 6. Then that would have to be the 6, and we'll force a 6 over there. And what else can this do? So those cells are locked out, which creates a pattern that all sees into that cell, which creates a pointed triple. So let's see. Why don't I highlight the cells that I've ruled out as 6s? So those can't be 6s. So these 3. Hold on a sec. Yeah, that's where I was. So these 3 all sees into that cell and that cell. Kings move away, knights move away, normal Sudoku rule away. So now that creates a pointed pair, which points backwards. But more importantly, it forces a 6 in there as well. And that's because that's the only 6 in that column. And that will eliminate that as a 6. So those 2 would be 6s. And that leaves us with an X-wing. So that's possible. What about if that is a 6? If that's a 6, then the next 6 has to be there and there and there and there. So let's highlight those, because this 6 sees into those 2 either by knights move away or kings move away. Let's see, those are ruled out, so that would have to be, those would have to be the 6s. So now we're on a dead end. Oh, hang on a sec. I don't even need to do any of that, because we've already got a 6 in here. There are no 6s in any of the other cells, so am I being daft? No, as soon as I eliminated those, I could already fill in the 6 in here. So this is a 6, which forces a 6 in there now, because those cells can't be 6 anymore. Either knights move away or normal Sudoku rule away. So that's me just being useless. So let's see. So those can't be 6s. I have a 6 over here and 6 over here, because that 6 sees into that cell and that 6 sees into those. So that can be a 6. So now I've got 2 possible places for 6 here, and they both see into these cells either by normal Sudoku rule or knight's move. So I can rule those out, which creates a pointed pair of 6 pointing back towards here. So actually no, that's a 6. So so I've got a pair of 6s there. So now that has to be a 6, because those can't be 6s now. And there's only one possible place for the 6 on this column. So that's a 6, because these 2 6s have ruled out those cells. And now I've got 2 pairs of 6s. And now I think we're really cooking with gas, because we've just resolved the 7 and 9s with these 6s. So that can't be a 7 anymore. So that's a 9. 7, 9, 7, 9, 7, 9, 7, 9, 7, 9, 7. That's a 7, 9, because of the 9 being nice move away, or the fact that 7 sees into that. And that has to be a 9 and 7. That's 7, that's 9. So all the 7s and 9s are resolved. And now we've got a 7 here, which resolves this 6. So 6 is in there. And I think we're now in a position to solve the puzzle. So let's clear everything. Highlights. Delete them. So it actually starts with a 7 rather than a 9. So let's think about this. If that's a 4, then these have to be 3s and 2s, which means I can't put a 2 in either of these cells. So that can't be a 4, it has to be, oops, this actually has to be a 5. So what does this 5 do? Those can't be 5s, so that can't be 5. These can't be 5s because of the adjacent consecutive cells. So now that creates a pointed pair, so that can't be 5 anymore. So none of those can be 5s. And those can't be 5s. Those can't be 5s. In fact, I know none of these can be 5s. I don't really need highlighting, but just to help me see a little bit. In fact, yeah, there's a pointed pair of 5s there, so I know that has to be a 5 actually. And that sees into this cell on a king's move, so that has to be a 5. That's a knight move away, so 5 is over there. And now, oh, what have I done? Oh, hang on, that could be a 5, can't it? So I shouldn't have be so presumptuous. So 5 sees into that, 5 sees into that, 6, 6. Yeah, 5 actually goes there. So that's a knight's move away, those are blocked out. That's a normal Sudoku rule, so 5 goes there. Knight's move away from that, so that's a 5. That's a 5. And finally, we have the final 5 there. Let's see, where can the 4s go? I think maybe I should colour in all these cells because, oh, actually, no, that's dangerous. Because now some of the purples should be unlocked because I'm no longer looking at 5s, I'm looking at 4s. So 4s can't go there, so that's a pointed pair of 4s. So let's see, pointed pair of 4s, they both see that cell. But 5 can't go there either. Sorry, 4 can't go there. Let's take out all the cells that 4s can't go in, and I'm sure we are going to spot what we're missing. So those can't be 4s, so that can't be a 4 now. In fact, we already knew that's a pointed pair of 4s. That's another pointed pair of 4s. So, we've got 2 possible 4s over here. Those can't be 4s. Ah, so that's a 4 then, which is a nice move away there. So that's a 4. That's a nice move away, so that's a 4. That 4 sees into all these 3 cells, so that's a 4. It sees into those cells. That cell can't be a 4 because it's next to a 5. So those are 4s. So these 4s look down here. That's a nice move away, so that's a 4. That's a Sudoku 4 away, so that's a nice move away from that 4. So I think that's sort of 4s. What about 3? So 3 can't go there, so these must be 2s and 1s. 3 can't go there either, so that's a 3. So that's a 3, which means that's a 3. And I think we have to have a 3 in there as well. Yep. So 3. So these are 2s and 1s. Well, 2 can't go there because of the 3, so 1 and 2. So 3 sees into those 2 cells, so that's a 3. These 2 3s looks up to there. These 2 3 looks up over here. These 2 3 looks into there, so that's the 3. And we're just left with 2s and 1s, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 2, 1, 2, 1, and 1. And that's 1 and 2. And there we have it. That is today's non-consecutive NT-Knight NT-King Thermo Sudoku, otherwise known as the Thermo Miracle Sudoku. I really enjoy doing this one. It's rated difficulty 4, but actually I think the logics are quite doable. I don't have to struggle with really complicated Sudoku logics like XY wings or anything crazy like that. So I hope you enjoy that, and please like and subscribe. And if you have a different way of solving this, please make a video and share it below in the comments. I really appreciate that. And I'm going to post this on Reddit as well, and let's see if other people have better solution than mine as well. Please leave comments. I'm sure I've done something silly, but I got there in the end anyway, slowly but surely. Thank you for watching, and I will see you guys tomorrow with some normal New York Times Sudoku.